Hello and welcome to Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer. I'm Ann Hess. California's Proposition 12, also known as the Farm Animal Confinement Initiative, has been a contentious issue for some U.S. pork producers, citing economic burdens falling on out of state producers, disproportionate effects on smaller and medium sized farms, and market disruption. However, some Pennsylvania hog producers say California got it right with Prop 12, and the transition to 24 square footage has been nothing but positive. Joining us to discuss this topic and more is Brent Hershey, a 40-year pork producer with Hershey Egg. Welcome, Brent, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into today's discussion, I'd like to remind the audience if you have any questions for Brent, you can post those there in the chat. Or if you're tuning in via social media, you can post those there in the comments. So, Brent, let's start by having you give us some background on your farm and when you decided to make the transition to be Prop 12 compliant. I know you have some photos here just to show what the farm looks like, the layout of the land before you changed over.
Okay, so I'm a sixth generation farmer here at the farm, the family farm, the sixth generation owned the farm, and in late '80s decided to get involved into pig production, actually mid '80s. So this farm here was built in '88, and so what when we got into the business, came from a tobacco, steer farming, layer chicken, layers egg family, and decided to get in hog production. And as we studied it out at that time, the system that everybody used was sow barns with the gestation crate for housing the sow, and that was what everybody did. That was sort of evolved in the 50s and 60s and 70s more and more, and that was kind of the standard of the industry as I got into the business. So it would be 40 years that I'm in pig production, and from the beginning we all had gestation. I had gestation housing, and of course learned all about that, and that's how we raise sows. We made some transitions from having nurseries and getting rid of the nurseries, so having weaner production only, and then the grow out was separate locations. So as we got into the 90s, we started to, in the late 90s, we started to hear some noise about these gestation crates, and about how the animal, is that really okay to house an animal like that? And at first was very resistant and thought, hey, that's a proven system and that's the way to do it. But as we analyzed it more and more, and in the early 2000s, states started passing laws banning that housing system in their state. We just started to realize more and more that there's going to be a problem here with this housing system. So here we changed this particular farm. The first the buildings on the two right, this was a 2,000 sow farm, and this was a traditional gestation crate barn. When we switched to Proposition 12 production, we built this building on the left behind the propane tank, and that was built so that we could increase our footprint to continue to hold 2,000 sows, but we needed more building space to do it. So that's a picture of the building right there, and that was a decision to do that. We did that 2 years ago, summer 2 years ago. We switched over. We're completely switched over now, right at 2 years. So this caused us to make a capital investment, obviously, to hold those animals and to give a bit more square footage in gestation. But another factor that came out of it was a breeding system that would be compliant to Prop 12 production.
And I believe you have a photo here too of the inside, what you've had before in place.
And this was essentially the issue, and it's really the issue that is at hand. It's why we're here. The reason that these 12 states passed laws banning this system, and the reason that California and Massachusetts now pass laws saying we don't want any meat from this system, is this animal cannot walk or turn around. this animal spends 3-4 months in that crate. That crate's 24 inches wide, 7 feet long. The animal can stand up and lay down, but the animal can't walk, can't turn around. And you start looking at that, and you start looking at all the animal systems of the world of all different species, and you realize there's really nothing else in that you can find anywhere that an animal is confined like that. And so that's where we realized ultimately, as this was evolving in the 90s and in the 2013, 14, that we're not going to be able to defend that. That we've got to figure out how to get away from that. So when California, before California Proposition 12 was passed, there was a movement to what we call an Ohio standard. I think many people in the industry are familiar with that, where we moved animals out of gestation crates after they were confirmed pregnant. And that sort of evolved in the 2013, 12, in that frame. And we transitioned to that in that period of time. We transitioned to open pen housing after confirmed pregnant. But then the California theme kept coming. We realized we're not going to be able to keep those crates for production either, for breeding and for that. So there's the old system. You just saw it there. And that's ultimately really the reason why Prop 12 happened.
Yeah, so let's take a look at that new system. Walk us through the initial cost of that transition, maybe any initial setbacks in sow welfare, maybe any additional labor needed.
So we looked at several systems for getting rid of the breeding section where we were using gestation crates. And we had already transitioned to open pens for the Ohio standard, and that was working very well for us. We were happy with that. We went with pens that hold 8 to 10 sows in each pen. But the breeding area was a problem. And we looked at several approaches, and we ultimately decided to settle on what we call the sow condo system. And here's a picture of it. There's various ways to do it. You can take the equipment out and put separate pens in. We chose to cut the crates apart and make bigger individual pens. This system takes about 42, 44 square feet of sow. So it takes much more space than California is required. But what we love about this system is we bring our sows out of the birthing crate and they move here. They were just weaned. They're drying up. The litters were just removed, and they are individually housed in these condos. And they can move around in there, but they also are individually housed. And that made simplicity for managing each sow. We found there's huge advantages that she is in that pen. She's pretty grumpy. She just got weaned of her litter, and she's in pain because of being weaned. And that takes a couple of days till she dries up. And then after that, she cycles, and we have the breeding process that starts. And by having this individual housing, we were able to have some of the argument for gestation crates was individual housing of the sows. Well, we have that with these sow condos. We didn't really step away from a proven approach of wanting to have individual housing for sows. And so this, as we transitioned to this system, it was the biggest thing was we needed more building square footage to do it, and more than Prop 12, because Prop 12 negates 24 square feet. On all these sow condos, we're 42, 44 square feet. But the simplicity of management is a huge win. We have no record keeping with this. Every animal stays in there by herself during her weaning, during her breeding process, post-breeding. And then our care of the animal is simplified so much because we know where she's at. She's in there alone. We have to walk further to go from animal to animal. But what we found was our labor efficiency was the same. It's the same as a gestation crate system. That farm, it's 2,000 sow farm. We didn't change the staff. We didn't change the amount of people, the amount of hours. We track our hours worked per 1,000 sows, and we didn't change. It was the same.
I
So it's
know
a
you
big
have
home run.
I know you have a couple more photos here to walk us through.
Here
Uh,
you can see that these sow condos lined up down through there, and this used to all be breeding crates, and that we opened that all up to sow condos now. Again, it takes more square footage. But I think at the heart of the issue, and here you can see we're breeding, so our sow condos on both sides, and each sow has her own individual pen, but she's able to move around in there. She's not restricted. And then we use a boar bot to take the boar down through, and we're still breeding. You see the people behind there, they're just getting ready, they're doing the breeding, and we breed much the same. But with this system, we don't, there's no stress of putting them in a pen or taking them out of pen or moving them around. They're in their individual condo the whole time. And what's happened is it's been very successful.
so your farm's been in this system now for 2 years. Walk us through some key learnings, success you've seen from this type of production. I know in the past, I think we've talked about maybe some relief from heat stress as well. We
Mhm.
have some video we'll play it while you visit here with us, but just walk us through how the last 2 years and what you've learned.
So, it's funny during the months, animals lay differently in those pens, the summer months versus the cooler months. But what we discovered was that sow mortality in all our farms, we have two farms that are Prop 12, our sow mortality dropped. So we've had some periods of 6 and 7%. Right now, we're right around 9% total sow mortalities, but our sow mortality dropped with the sow condos. Also, our conception rates went up and our farrowing rates increased. We think we're seeing 2% increase across the board on an average. And we think that's because the animal's free to move around and not stressed in the breeding condo. Then after we're bred and after that times period, we combine them. You can see me walking through pens here. This is these pens hold, I believe there's 10 in a pen here. And these are where after they're bred 3 weeks or so, we combine, and this is Prop 12 square footage. You're seeing that live right here. This is a 24 square feet of sow, and those pens and those animals are in those pens and are it's an example of that. We elected to go with the staunch and feeding system. We were retrofitting farms. We weren't building new farms. We take a hard look at ESGs if we were, but we're not building. So another thing was that managing that the efficiency of the management of the system. In every case, our production levels stayed the same and in some cases increased with the Prop 12 system. So we really didn't see any glitches coming out of that as we moved to it.
So, what kind of support systems do you have in place to keep things running smoothly from the nutritionist and veterinarian to your farm staff and supply chain?
So we're fortunate to have a group of people with us, farm managers, staff that have been with us a while. We have longevity in our farm staff, but we have a sow specialist who's in those barns every 2 weeks. And so we're constantly checking on those barns. We have a veterinarian we work with locally that we pull in for health challenges, but we are constantly working our system. Just we're a pig production system, and we're constantly working to keep production on track, to keep things happening at the farm that should be happening, monitoring. So our staff is monitoring, but they also have a supervisor in there monitoring them every 2 weeks. We work with the Wanger Group here in Pennsylvania with a feed, Wanger Feeds, and we've had good relationship with them. They've been a great support in nutritional aspects of the feed system. We had to. There's been a few little adjustments on the nutrition side with the open pen system, and I think we probably use a little more heat in the wintertime than we used to because our animals are not as dense as they were. But as a factor of the whole thing, our biggest the negative of the change was putting more square footage buildings down to house these animals. But if you take that and spread that over 20 years, that's really a small number compared to operational costs. And operationally, um, feed costs per pig produced and sow feed product, usage and all that. We haven't seen operationals right on par with where we were before, and in many cases improved.
And it leads me to my next question. I was going to ask, there's been a lot of industry people saying, before making this transition, make sure you're getting a premium price and at least a 5-year contract. What kind of returns are you seeing from transitioning to Prop 12? Or like you said, is this part of your 20-year plan and it'll flush out as you go?
So we designed this system to be very efficient with the goal that the premium for Prop 12 would drop and drop over time and maybe end up at 1% or 2%, very small. We don't see that lasting long. So we were very concerned about operational costs, labor, feed, all of those things. And so that was no change at all. We've seen some production improvements. So our biggest negative is our building. And as we spread that out, that's a long-term investment. And we look at that as that's part of being in the industry. That's part of moving forward as an industry. And so we thought our caution is that, you need to look at it that way. This isn't there was initially a jump in prices when Prop 12 rolled out. That's all gone now. Those prices have all dropped, and I can tell you they're dropping, and we think that will settle out and be a very small number at the end of the day, 2% or so.
Any concerns about other state law? I mean, we've talked about there's 12, but other state laws like Massachusetts Question 3. Any concern about the patchwork of regulations and, maybe steps voters might take in the future to say they require only organic feed or pasture raised?
I've heard those arguments, and sure, you can think, well, what if they dream up this idea or that idea? But I think we have to go back to why Prop 12 happened. We had something that really was undefendable. We really had something that you could put 100 people in a room and show them how that sow was housed and show that situation. And she lives in there for 3 and 4 months at a time without getting out once, without walking or turning around, even on a daily basis or weekly basis. It didn't happen. And you can see why, if you did that, if you showed 100 people that system, you're going to have 85% of them come back at you and say, that's not good enough. There's got to be a better way. And I think ultimately that's what came home to roost here. So this idea of all these other standards being invented, I think you got to step back and realize we had something that was so easily understood and easily challenged. That's what drove this out. I don't see I think that these ideas of these kind of fear mongering, really, of all these different standards popping up. And I think we can step back and look. I think that's my answer.
Any concerns, at the national level, there's efforts to pass legislation that maybe would prohibit state and local governments from impeding comments in agriculture standards in other states. If any of these bills should pass, I mean, do you have concerns about the profitability of your farm or even the consumer demand for your product?
Well, I think what the biggest concern I have is we don't want to listen to our consumer. The consumer looked at our system and said, that's not okay. And they banned it in 12 states. Now they passed laws in 2 states they don't want the product, and we aren't listening to them. This I think it's spoken. And I think that if you put more light on this issue, if you educate this issue more and more, you just lose all the more. You're not. It's a system that was. It's an old system. It's a relic of the past. And I think as an industry, we have to be thinking, how do we move past this? How do we get past it? How do we move to a system that we can defend? Literally, hey, if we can put a camera in our barns 24/7, we'll be happy to. They can see how those animals live and are cared for and see what's and then we take it. The objection to it would be, I'm not saying no one, because there's 100% isn't achievable in our world today, but the vast majority would say that's a nice system. So yeah, concerns, yes, and I'm concerned that the industry steps backwards instead of stepping forward.
So for producers that maybe are worried about stepping forward, maybe on the fence about transitioning a barn to be Prop 12 compliant, what would be your words of encouragement, maybe advice for making a smooth transition?
Well, it's important to study the system you're going to switch to. Animal systems are tough, and that was a challenge. I mean, we took years, and I'm very fortunate to have a team of people with me, have been with me for a long time, advising it, and we really vetted this thing hard before we changed. And we were sold probably 4 or 5 years ago that we were going to go the South condo method, and that's proven out tremendous on the breeding side. On the gestation side, we're very happy with our Staunton pens. We're interested, there's some ESFs out there that are looking very promising too. But again, it's important to do your research, pick a proven system, and I would say, again, be careful that you're doing that you're there were some attempts at this that were not successful in the beginning. Production got worse, and you don't want that, obviously, and that's a concern with anybody with production. I get that, but I think you also have to recognize that we're a business like any other business in America, and there are times that investments need to be made. You need to change with the times, and we need to be aware that we're held to that same standard as any other business. And I think we have to recognize this is a time for change. This is a time to step forward and figure out how to get to the better systems that we know are there.
As we wrap up our discussion here today, any key takeaways, final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience?
Well, it's good to have a good team of advisors and do your research, and the next thing is persevere. Animal production is a daily thing. It's constantly a work in progress. We all know what we go through to keep our animals in good condition, well fed up, and well cared for. And so I would just encourage you to look to that for the future.
Very good. Brent Hershey with Hershey Egg, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight. For you and our audience, we thank you for tuning in. For more previous 365s, be sure to check out the live and on-demand section of Feedstuffs 365 and National Hog Farmer. For Feedstuffs and National Hog Farmer, I'm Ann Hess.